I am excited for you to meet today's guest, Andrea Dora. Andrea Dora is an incredible human being who I had the blessing to know because I went to college with her younger brother, Dave, or she calls him David. One of the things that I want to make sure I mention up front in this episode is that the universal timing is no joke here. We recorded this episode 3 years almost to the day of his passing or his homegoing, and it felt like a celebration of his life and the impact he's had on our lives. So if you knew David, or Smitty, whatever you called him, I hope you take a moment today and just celebrate his life, whether it be through the wonderful conversations we're having here or your own silent reflection or connection back to him. I believe he is still here with us each and every day. So let me tell you a little bit more about Andrea. So Andrea hails from Kansas City, Missouri, and has been living in New York City for the past 18 years, where she works in the entertainment industry. She's performed on Broadway, and we talk a little bit about it in the episode, but she was in Tarzan and Motown the musical. And in Motown, she actually originated the role she played, which I think is pretty cool. She's been in commercials, and TV and film, and she was in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade last year. What? To say I geeked out on it when I saw that is an understatement. I was so excited, especially in a time where we couldn't get to be around people and hug people and see people we haven't seen in a while. Seeing her face was such a wonderful gift. Andrea owns her own business, The Band Method, which specializes in live music for corporate events, weddings, and private events. And so if you are looking for some live music at your next event, at your wedding, The Band Method is the way to go. I promise you. If you take a look at the incredible gift that Andrea is, The Band Method brings to the party. When I tell you, there was this entire circus scene that they did that blew my mind. On Instagram, I was I had my mouth open. I was like, how did you do that? So if you're in this spot where you're looking for live music, you're looking for a band, Andrea is your first stop, I promise. And then at the end of her bio, Andrea added something that made me smile so big. She wrote, Andrea's beautiful gift is her son, Makai, who lights up her world. And so for any of you who have someone in your life that lights up your world, or you are someone that lights up someone else's world, I'm just very happy that you're here with us today. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Andrea, welcome to Checkbox Other. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I am so impressed by your what you've created for women and men and everyone. But it just speaks to women, it's like you're a voice for us. And I think sometimes, we need the support, and we need to know that there are, there are other women out there like us, just doing big things. So we love you, and I love you, and I'm so proud of you and what you've accomplished.
Well, I told you I was trying not to cry. You start there. Come on.
I know.
Covered in chills over here. Well, thank you for saying that. And it goes both ways. I think, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of work on lately is really understanding when you feel something so significantly. Is it you seeing yourself reflected back, or the energy of another person coming to you? And what's happening right now is I feel like we are both so similar in this way of so much energy and light that we send out, that we're both blinding ourselves with the reflection of both of us at the same
exactly.
So I'm just, God, chills so hard. Oh my God, pull yourself together, Nikki. I am just so happy you're here on so many levels.
Thank you for having me.
So, okay, we're going to I'm trying to ground myself. We're going to go to the normal questions we start with. And then obviously for those of you listening, I had a gazillion questions. So I'm going to try to, keep us on track here. So,
but let me just say one more thing. No, seriously though, you're just sometimes, I think, I'm not a huge social media person, but it's nice to jump on social media and see some of the things you're posting, and just, it's just really inspiring. Sometimes you need to pick me up on a day-to-day, and it's the little things that really get us through, right? So, I just, like I said, it's just, I know it's time consuming, but because you're doing a lot, like you're putting a lot of stuff out there for all of us, for free. So just know that like, I appreciate you because we see that and we need it, it's just, that's you're like seriously doing your part for the world, and it's impactful. So I just wanted you to know that, because I know it's time consuming. It's not like an easy job to,
It is. Thank you. Of
course.
Well, my favorite thing to do, because I do all this research about the guests before I hop on, but my favorite part to start with is I want to hear a Cliff Notes version from you of your journey, the aha moments, the twists, the turns, maybe the side steps, the back steps, the leaps forward that have led you to where you are today.
Yeah. So, I was very blessed to have parents who just really supported us. And, my dad was that type of dad. When he would drop us off, like to go to elementary school, he would say, "Who are we?" And we'd have to say, "We're the Smiths." Like, repeat it and do a chant. And, and, and it gave us a little extra pep in our step, to go to school. It was fun. Obviously, I think as a kid, I probably was like, "Oh, I have to do this again." But, yeah, right. But he was always like that way, just, constantly checking in, guiding us. It was a very like collaborative relationship with my dad. He would, if I wanted to stay out late, till midnight or whatever, when I was in high school, which is like, right, that's a big deal when you're in high school. Yeah. He would like, we would talk about it. He's like, "So what are you planning on doing?" It was a very like, he wanted to, allow us to feel confident and responsible and make our own decisions and independent. And so he really, him and my mother really like, supported that, that way of raising us. So I think it, and being a mother myself, I really feel like it starts from the bottom, right? It literally, when you're a child, parenting is so crucial. And if you have that platform to kind of be yourself and that support, I just think, the only way to go is up. Like, you can only go up, And so, like, even in college, when anytime, I had issues or I was always checking in with my parents. And I think in college, a lot of, of my classmates were like, it was the whole antidepressant time, where, a lot of us, we would just, it was, it was tough with, if college got, stressful or whatever, a lot of my friends wanted to get on some sort of antidepressant. And I was, it's a lot. Freshman year, I went to school in a different state. I was just, felt lonely. You're 18, right? It's tough, but I was like, "Dad, I need to get on an antidepressant. I'm so depressed. And he was the type of dad, I was like, "You're not depressed. Suck it up. You can do this." So he was constantly just always like, with my dad, you could never be, he just enforced so much confidence and self-esteem. Like, he's like, "It's life. You just got to get over it," and that, oh my gosh, that really set me up so well, especially in the career that I chose, which is full of rejection, full of disappointment. So I would have to say, like, again, the parenting is where it kind of all really started. And, I really have to give my parents credit for that. Right.
Yeah.
And really just then kind of it evolved into like, also, my dad was very big in faith. And then my brother and I, we kind of established our own, view on religion and faith and all of that. And, I started to really believe in things like putting positive energy out there. And, I believe that the universe feels and hears. And, I believe you have to be specific about your dreams. I tell the story, the first time I moved to New York, I moved to New York, and the first audition that I went to, first time I went to an audition, I met a kid, and and we were taught in college, listen, if you want to get on Broadway, it's gonna at least take 3 to 4 years. You got to put in the work. You got to put in, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm still waking up every day at 6 a.m. waiting in line, because I'm a hard worker. Like, that's what I do. I get up, I get it done. So I was up every morning while my classmates were like partying and drinking. They're like, move to New York, yeah, you know. And I'm like waiting in line at 6 a.m. in the cold outside of like the Actors Equity building, like freezing, trying to get seen for an audition.
Mm-hmm.
But that was what I did. And I expected to be doing this for like 3 to 4 years. I was like, okay, I got this, I'm set. And this guy in the audition, he was a freshman, he was just graduated to first year, auditioning in New York. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna get on Broadway by the end of the year. And I was like, he's great. Is he realistic? Like, he ain't gonna get on Broadway, and come on. And then, I went home that day and I thought about what he said, and I was like, why couldn't I say that too? Like, why couldn't I believe that and dream that and put my energy towards that? I kid you not. I go home, I write it in my journal. I'm going to be on Broadway by the end of the year. Do you know that shit came true? I was on Broadway. That was the first show I did. I got in a Broadway show after being in New York 3 months.
Oh.
And I'm not saying, listen, it was hard work. And it was, obviously I was, putting myself out there, but I think so much of us, we forget that your belief system has to match the work that you're doing. You know what I mean? You have to believe that you can get there. Don't worry about the details. Like, how is this going to happen? How am I going to make this happen? You just believe in the end. Like, I can get there. I can do this. And then every day you just strive.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny. So many pieces of this keep like lighting up for me. And I think there's a part of this that feels like such a through line as you're talking about your dad being with you and Dave being like, who are you? The Smiths. Right. Like, you're just like, of course we are. We're here. We're taking up space. We are who we are. We're going to own this space, and we are honored and respected by our parents and therefore by the world around us, because that's what we've learned, that we should be able to show up in our space as us. And so much of that is what, especially in the coaching that I do, we're taking so much time for any of us that have fallen into the way that things have been done. We're taking so much time removing all the weight and all the barriers that have been put on us, that like, that is why it takes so much time. That is why it takes so much energy. If we've been conditioned to believe that I need to put in my time in order to even be viable enough to be seen, then how would we even take up the space when we have 30 seconds? Right.
Right. So exactly.
It's so interesting to hear, because, so much of the work that I'm doing with people in their, mid 20s to mid to late 40s is that, like, no, you deserve to be here. You deserve to take up space, and to be able to offer that through very young age, that you're just like core belief in yourself is you are enough just as you are, creates such a beautiful future. And it creates a different operating model for sure. And so, maybe it takes people a really long time to get there, because it's not just mindset. Like, there are a lot of barriers, systemic barriers, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of power dynamics that are at play. And also, when your beliefs are keeping you small, you don't even get the opportunity for the system to make you small in that same kind of way. So
because you're doing it to yourself. Yes. Yeah.
So being able, and again, like, this is where I have a little bit of an issue around imposter syndrome, but imposter syndrome is a very real thing individually, but it also is something that has been created collectively. And so how can we, in each of us, have the control that we have in our own experience and create this fan club in our mind? I always think about the movie.
100%.
What is that movie? The one with all the emotions? Inside Out. I was thinking about the movie Inside Out, the Pixar movie Inside Out, where there are all the different emotions in her head, and each of them are a character. And if you could there's an exercise in coaching called the board of directors exercise, which is as well like having your crew, your kind of spiritual crew, your mental crew that's saying, go, you've got this. How, what are those messages? Like, having that internal crew that's saying, you could do this. Like, sure, it's going to take other people how much time, it doesn't matter. I know you can show up and be you.
But it's crazy. Like, I don't want to also like sound like I constantly
No.
And I always feel like those layers are lifted. And like, I listen, like the reason why I have my business is because like, I mean, listen, like, again, I know how to do the work, but sometimes I doubt myself. And I just think that if I had to like look back in my life, I think a lot of times that has held me back.
Yeah.
Like I could even have accomplished so much more. And I like look back in hindsight. I mean, and I say to myself, it's almost like it's true. It's like if we could figure out how to build these team of people that just like follow us around being like, you can do this, you can do this. Yes, you can. You know, because we just talk ourselves out of so much. And you think that goes away when you get more successable. It doesn't. It's like,
no, it gets louder.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because, you know, I remember as a kid feeling like something that a great invention would be to have like this soundtrack of your life, minus the scary parts where it's like slow and creaky and makes the scary even more scary. But like when things are really exciting or uplifting or promising, that you had the ability to have kind of that choral arrangement or that thing behind you that's like pushing you and nudging you forward. So the ability to have that kind of wind behind you, pushing you towards the thing that you're feeling a little wobbly about. And it sounds like, yes, well, there is a part of it that's like you grew up in a place where, you know, confidence was part of just like everyday operations. And like, yeah, why wouldn't you bet on yourself? There is the human element. And again, the world that we live in that makes us constantly feel like we should be questioning ourselves, or we should be somebody other than we are. We should be twisting ourselves to be something else. And so both of those things can be true. Right. And so it's so interesting to be able to, live in the in-between of those things. And obviously I know you and I have talked a lot of times about that kind of not really fitting. I mean, obviously a big part of this podcast is all about that. And so I would love to hear from you about a time in your life, no matter topics you pick, wherever you want to go, where you have felt other or different. And it can be more than one if you want to. But I feel like there's
I hope nobody's gonna like me. I mean, listen, whatever. I'm really speaking from the heart here. Okay. So, you know, I have to say it was really tough watching, you know, after COVID, the whole, you know, Black Lives Matter and in every industry was doing this, you know, in my industry specifically was doing more integrative sort of, you know, like one example comes to my head where this specific weddings and private event, they're like a collective, and they throw these huge events for planners and vendors all around the world, and you fly in and you go to the conference. It's like a whole thing. And, you know, not one person in their team was a woman or man of color. You know, not, I mean, and so all of these, you know, most of the speakers were, you know, there are not a lot of, you know, people of color. So, you know, this whole thing turned around, right? And then they started hosting more, you know, they wanted to chat about, you know, and host, you know, forums on, you know, how we can be more inclusive and this, and, you know, and just explaining to them, right? So a lot of times, like, you know, we want to be, you know, don't just invite us to the party, like take our hand and walk us into your circle. You know what I mean? Yeah. Don't just say, come on. And like, while we're sitting on the porch and you're inside having fun, like we want to be in like, hello, this is my friend so-and-so. And please, you know, that's the type of, you know, that's the type of integration we need. And to, you know, and then so listen, I was 100% supportive of that. And I totally stood behind that. And I think it's very helpful just to open the conversation, and because I think a lot of it was awareness, right? And that's not like an excuse, but that's what the feedback that I got from a lot of my, you know, white counterparts is like, I didn't realize, like that's how they would always say, I didn't realize. But for someone who is biracial, I feel like we got left out yet again. And I say that to say, you know, I would then, you know, chiming in here on, you know, that was when Clubhouse, everyone was going Clubhouse crazy. Yeah. And I would ask questions and chime in. And, you know, and then I noticed within my own, you know, half of my Black culture, I noticed feeling excluded from that group.
Yeah.
And, you know, then thinking back, like, you know, who are the planners that hire me? Wow, I don't have there's not one referral from a Black vendor or planner that I've ever received. Like, wow, you know what I mean? Like thinking like, so, you know, we're here, you know, screaming to the rooftops, like, listen, we're not being represented. But then within our own race, there's like, there's exclusion. And, you know, because, or, you know, don't worry about Andrea. She's, you know, half white. She'll be taken care of anyway. Or I don't know what the thinking was behind it. And so it was so, it just made me, it literally, Nikki, it brought me back to elementary school and all the schools that I went to, right? I was like, you know, when I went to an all white school and I felt like a minority because I was, and then when I went to an all Black school and I felt like I was a minority, like never being able to fit in, like these white planners looking at me like I'm ethnic, but the Black planners are looking at me like, you're not Black enough. I mean, it was just like, fit me straight back.
Familiar.
And I would try to bring that up, right? And on these calls and like kind of, you know, because I would tiptoe around it because a lot of the my Black vendors who are friends of mine, they would say, Andrea, I don't think you should open that can of worms. They would be like, that's a conversation that we should have within our own kind of, you know, within our own space. Yeah. So, but it was so crazy because this whole year, it's really amazing how I still feel like I felt as a child.
Yeah.
Just left out.
Much. Yes. So much. You know, it's so interesting because the beauty of, I guess the beauty of having this podcast before last summer.
Right.
And having this conversation intentionally out loud about identity, and very specifically, my focus in the initial parts of this podcast were to bring people whose voices were not necessarily heard.
Right.
And the ability to do that as somebody that has lived in the in-between, as somebody that has had to be the darkest and lightest in many rooms, the one who has had to have the question mark over her head when everybody looks at me of what are you? Like that experience itself has been a really interesting one because there's obviously benefits and there are drawbacks. And the drawback, which it's funny because I have a group of people, you know, ethnically ambiguous people for sure, right? Like that word tends to capture a lot of the people that have that question mark that people are asking, what are you? We're like kind of the in-betweeners. I think of us as like Marvel characters, like we could be the Avengers, the in-betweeners are like the future that we're leading towards. But so much of our origin story is that feeling. So much of our origin story is you don't really fit here. You're not enough of this here. You're not enough of this there, but also externally without you even knowing me, you're assessing me based on my not enoughness. So I can feel that without a word being spoken. And then this is the part where I feel like when you're talking about like, can you invite me into the space? Can you are my dance moves allowed? Even if you invite me onto the dance floor, are my dance moves, is there enough room for me to do my thing? Or do I have to do like the waltz your way? Or am I allowed to, you know, get down the way that I would in my house? Can I do that? Without the invitation, it's like, we haven't necessarily had the space to knock on the door. And
right.
Even if we get through a door, it's not people surrounding us that look like us. Again, the beauty is demographically, our world is getting more and more of in-betweeners. Like the 2020 census is showing that there's like a huge uptick. And also growing up, I always talk about this, like growing up with our parents being not far off of when it was illegal in this country to be together. It makes a lot of sense that our institutions, one, but also just our collective consciousness and conversation hasn't adapted or evolved because it's with the original stain of our country being so racially motivated, whether you talk about Native Americans or you talk about slavery, we have so much of this background of colorism that is just the way we decide your value, but we don't talk about it here in America, that like, we've been taught that we can't talk about it or take up space. Though you have parents that are saying, let's talk about things, let's do this. The world around you is like, shh,
Even as you're saying, let's talk about this in the back room ourselves. It's like, no, we need to create space to talk about it out loud, because it's just going to keep doing it.
Right.
So it's the struggle of, and, you know, I don't know how much therapy you do. I'm a very big proponent of therapy.
Yes.
One of the big things that we talk about in therapy with my therapist is about, you know, the younger self and how you have the ability in the relationship to honor and own the space of where that younger self lived. And yes, this last year, this last 18 months, this last, I would say 4 or 5 years, for sure, have had that younger version of me show up, have had the younger version of so many of us that have to figure out how do I fit in this space, and how can I make myself the least threatening in some spaces, actually in both spaces, right? Because if you're seen as the whitest, so often you are seen as the person that's going to inflict harm. And if you are the darkest, you are the person that is the, let me grab my purse danger, which is all like, again, many of you can't see my face, but like the amount of just like, what the fuck of it all. But also it's very real. And so how do you hold, as you're processing this as an adult, how do you hold and honor the space and the emotions and the kind of trauma that comes for sure with that racialized existence, that you don't have a landing spot growing up to fit in a larger group that's actually having vocal conversation about it.
And I agree with you. It's like, and you're constantly getting it at every turn. I mean, you know, and when I moved to New York, it was like, in college, it was like, oh, you can't be cast, or high school, what am I talking about? You can't be cast in this role because you look too ethnic, you know, and college, not getting the same opportunities and exposure as my, you know, because again, I was a minority in college. And then coming to New York, you know, can you sound more Black in how you sing? Can you riff and sound this way because you look this way? So your voice has to match. I mean, it's just like, you know, and I think that's why I have kind of migrated, I would say, over to, you know, it's cheesy, right? Like I sing at weddings, like it's, you know, I left the last Broadway show cheesy. I was in, and I like, you know, walked out the stage door and got signed autographs, to like walking in the back door through the kitchen to take my place at a, you know, a wedding venue. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I choose to do that because I am my own boss, and no one is telling me you're too over the top, or you're not singing Black enough, or you're not, you know, your skin is not dark enough, or you're not fitting this you know, it's I don't have to deal with that. And I think you learn where you fit in, because you say, listen, if I can't fit into your world, I'm going to make my own world, and I'm going to do my own. And that's really why I've, you know, like I said, really, I love what I do now, owning my own business, singing at weddings. People love me for who I am. My wedding clients don't want me to be anybody different than Andrea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, it's the thing about so much of this conversation that we have about race that becomes so binary is that it limits the reality that we're all on a spectrum about it. And so the fact that when you're on a spectrum, there's room for every person to exist on that spectrum. And so when we are being told that you need to do this, be more this, be less yourself, be more something else, that's an ideal that nobody really knows what the ideal is, but we're just going to keep telling you you're not it in however way you show up. The beauty is that so many of us are realizing, oh, the system's rigged, the game isn't set up. I'm going to show up and make spaces where not only can I be me, but because I have had this experience from from the jump that I couldn't be me, that I'm going to create spaces and open the door for you to be you, no matter your racial background. You could be, I always talk about the fact that this important work about creating spaces for belonging, it serves every person, because each and every one of us is told from the messages that we need to be different than who we are. And so the ability to create these spaces, and I don't know how familiar you are with this, but in the American Express survey that they did, I think it was 2019, was talked about the fact that women are opening more businesses than men for sure. And Black women are opening more businesses than any other racial group. And so much of that is a product of systems not creating space for us to exist as ourselves. And so we're like, all right, I'm going to go create this.
That's right. Yeah.
And the reality of what we're experiencing through our cultural tendencies is that often what comes with that innovation and that creating of new is that people want to assimilate and they want to appropriate. And so the interesting thing is the ability for us to take up space and to talk about taking up space allows us to reclaim and own our experience in our space and not become kind of a caricature of wherever that appropriation is taking it. And so it's so interesting to think about how we talked about to start this, right? How you're coming into this space of Broadway of, oh, you're going to have to work really hard. You're going to take all this time. You're just be prepared to not get there. And you're like, well, I got there. I see what's going on. And then what you're saying towards where we are current day is I was there. I was in this space. It didn't necessarily fit for me. And I even, I again, rolled my eyes a little bit when you were like, this whole like wedding thing, it's like small. I think it's huge. I mean, for how many people is that like one of the biggest days of their lives? How many people, especially right now in COVID, are like, the biggest thing I was working towards, I didn't get to have. How much is that wedding day so important? But what we tend to do is we tend to minimize things where we get to really celebrate, honor, and feel joy. And so the beauty of saying, okay, that mountaintop, that Broadway mountaintop, yes, that was a mountaintop. That is a mountaintop for many people, but that doesn't mean it's it. And I can also look at it with a critical lens and say, okay, here's what worked for me. Here's what didn't. And I'm going to say, no, thank you. And I'm going to go create. I learned so much from that allows me to transition over here, but it is more important for me to be able to show up as myself than to be the ideal of what I thought was at the top of that mountaintop.
Yes, exactly. And I think, I try to, my musical theater friends and I from college, I always run into a lot of them and everyone's doing different things. We all don't necessarily, do what we thought we were going to do with our careers. And that's amazing, right? Like, I think that's great. But, we talk about this all the time and it's just like, I think if anything, I think what we kind of missed in college, like what they didn't teach us is like, you have to figure out a way to do what makes you happy. And even if it's not like, like, even if this is not the plan that you had, like, it's okay. You can abort your mission and figure out what's going to make you happy,
Yeah.
So, I feel like I feel really blessed that I fell into these, and I know I'm telling you that I do a lot of times feel like, when I'm not happy, I just immediately like focus on being happy, and then everything kind of falls into place. Like I focus on how can I wake up every day and be proud and happy and not stressed and positive. And if it means that I have to kind of like sacrifice some things or give up some things, I do it. Like I don't. You won't catch me. Listen, if I'm working my buns off all day and I'm like, I will take an hour off and just chill, relax the mind. Like I believe so much in mental health and keeping such a positive outlook on life and being appreciative and showing, just feeling like, just feeling not complacent, that's the wrong word, feeling
satiated, full, making sure that you're taken care of.
Yeah, not always saying shoulda, coulda, or wish I had this.
And
I think there's a strive for every day.
And the present moment that you're talking about there too, the ability to honor and know. I think part of what you're like falling into things feels a little bit like, well, but there's intentional work that goes all around that. It might just not be in a 5-step plan that someone else would make. It's that you have a very intentional way of operating. And the intentional way of operating is honoring and owning the fact that you can get shit done. Right. And also knowing when you need rest and you need a minute, and believing that the universe around you, the relationship you have with that positive energy and manifestation you were talking about earlier, will offer the opportunities up for you. You don't need to create them. You don't have to create them so hard and will it all the way through and exhaust yourself in the creation of the opportunity. It's, I can know and honor myself. And when something shows up, I know what to say yes to.
Exactly. I think, we all are like on a mission to just be aware of that and know when it comes our way. So definitely, I think also having people, like you said, a team behind you. I think I give props to people in my life because, I think I'm one of those people. I like to check in with people, and I love getting feedback, and my husband's really great at just being like, he's like, you're gonna be fine. You got this. It's fine. It'll work out, and it always works out. It does. You know what I mean? In the end.
Yeah.
Because I think, like I said, I think when your belief system and you want to do good work, you care, you're passionate, you have the work ethic, it does. It's gonna work out. You just gotta really believe it.
I do.
So
let me say this. Your brother. So for those of you that don't know, my friend Dave, I think we've talked about him in the past. And if you don't know him, oh my goodness, you will now know him because we're going to bring him right here into this conversation with us. But he passed away in 2018. This week, 2018.
Yeah, that's why I scheduled
tomorrow.
That's why I scheduled this with you. I said this is the best time to do this. David would,
oh my goodness,
he's here with us. So
what I was going to say is you're talking about that crew. And I think I've said this to you before, but he is in my brain. He is like in my brain, encouraging me kind of that. I feel like when you were talking about your dad being like, come on, keep going.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
And, just like poking fun at me and making sure you stay real. And also like, you can do this shit. Like, that's what we're here. I mean, he was the person that I had the opportunity, I went to a predominantly white school, and then we met at a predominantly white school for sure. But I didn't have many people that I could talk to at all about my racial identity, for sure. I mean, definitely not my white friends. And then I had other friends that were not white, but most of them weren't Black, because in my hometown, there were not very many Black people. And my dad and my mom, we didn't talk about those things. And so coming to school, and Dave came my sophomore year, and he and I actually got to have conversations about race. In this past year and a half, I will tell you, I feel like there was such a sorrow early on about like, oh my God, this would have been like, we would have gone crazy in these conversations.
Oh my gosh, right?
But also then honoring and knowing that even though you're physically not here with me, I hear you. I know, like, I can have these conversations with you because your existence is still very much here for me. And the power of that nudge, that wind, that poke on the side, that come on, get up the stairs faster feeling, like you could do this better than that. Like, don't let them get you down. That whole feeling of what sounds like was so much of just the fabric of how you both were brought up, is something that I think is such a wonderful gift. So it's not just the people that are here physically. It's the people that have had an influence on your life that are still with you right now. And again, no matter what your belief is, I encourage you to think about, are there forces, there are people that may not be with you, even if they're on the other side of the country and can't be with you. Is there that type of energy and that kind of buoying support that can be there for you? And your brother, for sure. You can't see, but I have a hat of him over here. I have his picture. Every time I open the door, he's there. And the song Morning.
He loves you.
That song Morning, every morning. My goodness. And so the ability to honor and hold space for that encouragement. Yeah. And that encouragement doesn't always have to be, oh my God, you're the best ever. It can be like, let's go, light a fire under your ass. Like, stop questioning yourself, all that kind of stuff. That person that's in your corner, I think of it as like a boxing ring. Someone that's like, you just got punched in the face. Come on, you can go. Come on, spit this out. Let's keep going. You can keep moving forward. And knowing and honoring who those people are and where those forces are coming from is so important.
Yeah, like I feel like my brother was very like real about what life, he knew life is like. He would always be like, look, life is tough. Like and with his situation, he got dealt a tough hand, and, so it was interesting just like watching his whole process. I mean, he struggled a lot. And I think, he was the type of person who kind of held a lot of things in, but I was the sister that could push him to talk. I think that's just like, a thing that I noticed my husband and dad do too. They got to get him to talk. Yeah. But I think he just really, just accepted, like, listen, life is hard, but it's just how you deal with all these, you know, adversities that come your way.
Yeah.
And do you take it with stride and keep moving?
Yeah.
You know, you don't let it bring it down. You bring
Right.
you down. You keep moving, you keep pushing through, you know?
Yeah.
So we come from that. My grandmother, she was very like, you know, like she would say, life isn't for the weary, you know, it's like, you gotta,
Truth.
you know?
Yeah.
And, but like, think about things that happen to you. Like, I know as a mother, like one day he's like, has a cold, and the next day he didn't get into this soccer camp. And then, I mean, it's all these things, like life, right?
Yeah.
Then your business, and then you're, you know, I mean, being in a marriage, don't think because you get married, it's done. Like, you got to work at that crap too. I mean, that is like a fucking job. It's a job. You know, no, my husband's got to be happy. Oh, listen, got to get on my knees soon. You know, I got to make him happy. You know, it's like, it's constant. It's like, it's like so much stuff. So you go insane, like having to think of everything. And especially, like I said, when, you know, you're thinking of everything for your family and making sure, did we make that appointment? Did I call this person? Did I do, you know, but all of that is like, you know, really, I think it's just how you react to it all, right? Yeah. That's kind of, you got to figure out a way to just like take it and just be like, I got this, I can do this, you know?
Yeah. And I think even more so what you're saying about like, you got to come with the understanding from the beginning.
Yes.
That it's not going to be easy.
Right.
Because again, the amount of energy it takes to have that resistance to, I thought this was going to be easy. Why is this so hard? The energy for you taking up so much time and space that you're mad that it's hard. Right. Use that to overcome the hard, because
that's right.
Again, we're taught to not look at, feel things. And then we're surprised when, like, I always think about my own personal example is I was shocked when my body shut down a few years ago, but also it was because I was like, everything's fine. Everything's cool. We're not going to pay attention to all the stuff that's going wrong over there. We're not going to pay attention to all the signals that are saying, stop, slow down. We'll just keep going. And then it falls apart. And it's like the amount of energy I used to say nothing's there was the reason everything shut down. And so being able to honor the fact that as a human being, there is struggle. As a human being, there is resistance in this existence that we have. It is important to be able to hold that space. So then you can really feel the joy. You can really feel all the other wonderful things that come with it. Exactly. You can honor and own that not only are you a human being that's flawed, but every other person around you is a flawed human being. I'm telling you,
that is like, I think that's what gets me through it, really, is like knowing like, we all are struggling together. Like, you know, and COVID taught us that. We were all like, oh, I can't, you know?
Yes.
So that's what makes like humanity so beautiful, right? That, you know, we really are the same on the inside. You know, we really
are. We are. And even more so, right? The ways that we're different is what actually makes this life worth living. Like if we were exactly the same all the time, then why would you need to leave your house? You could just look in the mirror. And if everyone is exactly the same as you, then what's the point? Like there would be no excitement in life if people weren't different than you. There would be no innovation if nobody had friction and disagreement. There would be nothing if we didn't have curiosity and the ability to see the world through different lenses. And so I'm so curious to think about, like, from your perspective, we've talked now about kind of 3 different generations. Mm-hmm. So parents, your son, how do you see the kind of the passed down learnings, but also the things that you're learning from your son being passed up, and how is that kind of processing, especially in this kind of incubator of everybody being in the same space for so much of the last year and a half?
Right, exactly. Well, I've learned that DNA is strong as shit. Let me tell you. Like I look at my child like that is like a mini me, but it's so beautiful, you know. Being a parent is like, wow. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's when people there's no lie. It's the hardest job. Like, and I work we lug speakers and move, like my husband and I work our ass off, but the kid job, woo, that is like tough, because it's like they try you physically, mentally at the same time. It's like everything happens at the same time. You just are like, you know, I have a respect for people who have more than one kid. Like I am like, wow, or people who are single parents. Like it's incredible. But yeah, I think, you know, one thing that I try to do, you know, and what I've been thinking about more with my son is, you know, I just want him to know all his different cultures and his backgrounds, and, you know, so I think I'm striving, and you know, obviously with my brother not being around, you know, he would have been such a influential, you know, figure and representative of my African American culture, you know, and so it's tough, right? I feel a little bit like I got the shit into that stick, you know, when it comes to like my son and my brother not being around. But, you know, I think I've just learned that, and I'm learning that my son, you know, kids are resilient. They pick up things like I don't even have to like sit down with them and be like, this is, this is how Africans came to this country. They were just, you know, I don't even have to go through that. I mean, we're not at that point yet, you know. It's like he just picks up, you know, mannerisms from my dad, and, you know, or even with my Russian, in-laws, like he picks up certain things from them. Like kids just like are like sponges, and so it's kind of happening naturally, which I really love, you know. But there's that thing again, and it's maybe it's linked. Maybe I need to talk to my therapist about that, but maybe my concern is like linked to my childhood, just wanting him to know his Black side, his Italian side, his Russian side, making sure that he's well-rounded, you know?
Yeah.
So that's like a thing for me.
It's so interesting because, you know, it's like this, there's such a beauty in the ability to say, here's all the parts that make you who you are. And you don't have to be one way to be them, but I want you to be exposed to what makes you, what has brought you into this world, what many influences and forces have brought you to be where you are right now. And the beauty of, again, I think about, the child's mind for sure, and the resilience of a child's mind for sure, but just the human mind and the ability for us to be surrounded by things. And when we act as though, this is where I have a hard time with when we say a whole bunch of words, but we don't deal with the fact that we're marinating in a whole bunch of oppressive shit. We can say things over and over and over again, but we are assimilating what's around us. And so as you're saying, like, I didn't go through the 1619 project with my small child, but he is learning things. It's like, he's learning things that the 1619 project wouldn't necessarily be able to teach him, because it is so ingrained in just his daily operation and the world that he's marinating in, that you have created and you have offered in front of him and the people that he's surrounded by. But the ability to honor and own that for an adult to be able to be like, oh, well, yes, we have been in this awareness piece for a lot of people in the last 18 months. Last summer, for sure, a lot of people were like, oh my God, we had a broken bone in our whole history of our country that we've just been trying to put Band-Aids on and never healed. No way.
Exactly.
Like, the awareness part is important, but I think the choice to go from awareness to understanding, to move back past like, oh my gosh, shock, to like, why did this happen? And then to action, and the ability to witness yourself acting and making choices to be, and you as a mother making choices to say, I'm going to expose you to all of these things because it is important. I'm not going to tell you what's better or worse. I'm going to allow you to live in this marinade that allows you to understand the different components of what have made you you, and have brought you to this earth at this point in time, with the makeup, the wonderful, strong DNA you're talking about that is coming through. And so interesting, like, because with adults, especially when I'm working with clients that are talking about DEI efforts in organizations, it's like there's constantly this attempt to put Band-Aids on things that are much bigger than a small wound. And it's like, what we need to do is we need to understand what's happening all around, that without language, people are taking in and operating from, because as human beings, our brains have the ability to adapt. Our brains have the ability to create new neural pathways. But if we choose not to change the surroundings, our brain's not going to be able to do that. You can chant, like, I don't know if you watched the Emmys this weekend, but there were a couple moments that were just cringeworthy for me, but there was one moment where I can't remember the exact word, but it was the Queen's Gambit. One of the white men that is, was on stage accepting awards for one part of this, stood up and said that the lead actress brought the sexy back to chess. And then the next breath started talking about smashing the patriarchy. And I was like, right. So you've been given the smash the patriarchy language, right? I'm teaching you the words, I'm teaching you the things to memorize in history class so you understand. But in your behavior, you're doing the exact opposite of what you said in the next breath. In your behavior of talking about the fact that a woman doing chess is literally, her goal was to bring it sexy back. Right. In a patriarchal society, it's the opposite of smashing the patriarchy, right? It's the opposite of that. So you're using language, you're using the script that you've been told makes you woke, makes you an ally, makes you a feminist, but in your behavior, because you are swimming and soaking and marinating in patriarchy all day, you don't even realize that in the same sentence, you are employing the harmful rhetoric that you are then using language to say, oops, but it's like saying no offense and saying something super offensive. It's like you meant offense, but you just thought you could put buffer language. And so the ability to really honor the fact that the actual marinade, the actual stuff that we're surrounded by has more influence than the words we learned to regurgitate is so important.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Oof.
Wow, that was crazy.
I screamed at the TV. I was like, do you want to, and everyone's smiling and clapping. I'm like, you're all getting fucked. Yeah. You're all getting fucked with. There's a mind fuck happening right now, right here, right now. So anyway, okay.
Well,
so
we're all in the mind fuck. Like, I feel like,
yeah, right.
On the mind fuck planet these days.
Yeah. Can
I have no clue what's going on with anything.
Yes.
I was literally like, you could tell me anything. I don't know. Okay, fine. Yes.
Yeah. You're like, hold on.
Wear a mask. Great. Don't wear a mask. Okay. Like, what do you need me to do? I don't know what is going on.
Right. Why am I so fascinated when I see somebody smiling? Oh, wait, because I haven't seen the bottom half of people's faces in a year.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's so really honoring and owning the fact that like we're in a spot right now where this level of depth of identity assessment, but also in this level of like very basic human needs and wants are not being met, of just like being able to see the face of another person and hug another person, that how do we hold both things? Because both things are important. And how do we move forward with both those things? And, I think especially in the last, 4 or 5 months of vaccine euphoria and then vaccine hesitancy and Delta variant, that we have this kind of like, we were feeling hopeful and then it was like, and we're back in like, I feel like we're all in the spin cycle right now. We're like, what, how do I,
Yes.
And so how do we show up as, right? You're talking about how important it is for us to show up as ourselves and be able to make space and own that. Like, I'm so curious, especially for your company, right? So you're going and you are like, what I would say is probably one of the most important parts of somebody's special day. I would love to hear, and I'd love for you to share a little bit of how you adapted your service offerings for people, because the ability to kind of stay afloat when the waves are smashing us all around during COVID, that I will tell you, I got like so emotional when I saw you post that first like virtual one that you did. I was like, this is it. This is how we as humans are able to adapt. So can you talk a little bit about how I guess you've kind of kept your head above water, but also how you thought about it adapting to make the current situation work? Because, as business people, that's kind of what we got to learn to do, because we don't have control over what tomorrow is going to bring necessarily.
Yeah, no, 100%. My husband says I'm terrible at business because I'm the type, like, you can call me and I give away free stuff. Like, I'm just like, I am the worst because like, I love what I do. So I don't think about money like that. Like, I literally don't. I'm like, oh, let's just throw in this, or maybe we should add, like, I'm making their like wedding that they did not, their funds were not allocated for all these extra things for the band. And I'm throwing them in because I'm trying to make this like grand experience. But I still believe that, I'll continue to do it because what I've gotten back from it, the response, like, and that's not the reason I do it, but it just tells me that it pays off because, it's almost like the more you give, the more you receive. I 100% believe in that, like that, saying, like, the more you give, the more you receive. And so whether it's like giving your heart, giving your, whatever you can give, so I think that's really been my key, right, throughout all of this, because a lot of our clients, it was tough. They I just tried to focus on being super flexible, but you know, people, it was tough. We're in an emotional business, and weddings are like you said, people, you know, they plan this for years. This is their dream since childhood. And you know, some of my clients are spending millions of dollars on their weddings, you know? And then you tell them like, oh no, if you want to postpone to a Saturday in 2021, it's going to be a little extra money because we have to, like, you know, trying to explain to them like, listen, you're taking away a Saturday that we have open, that we could book a new client, you know, because think about it. People are like, you're working so much this year, but really I'm just, you know, completing contracts from 2020.
Right.
And that money that I was going to make in 2020, I'm just making now, but with more work because I'm still doing the new work for 2021. So it's really like, sometimes when I see like you know, my husband's like, oh, we made this, I'm like, or, you know, oh, we're, you know, this, you know, our bottom line, you know, we can do this, we can, you know, supplement this, whatever. You know, you got to kind of, you reground yourself and say, listen, wait a minute, we're just making up from last year.
Right,
like,
right.
This is not extra. This is last year's. Yeah. So that was like the difficult thing is, you know, just standing your ground with your business, right? Like, when, you know, like, again, I'm someone who will typically, and I don't know where this comes from. I've talked to my therapist about this. I'm like, why do I have such a problem pricing myself? Why don't I feel like I'm worthy enough to ask to, you know, request this pricing? I work my buns off. I just finished telling you, Nikki, I throw in extras. I do all this stuff. I go above and beyond, you know, and I listen to my girlfriends who are, you know, my white girlfriends who have no problems saying like, oh, I'm charging this month this much, and you know, and they have no problems like putting themselves on this pedestal and requiring people to view them that way. You know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, do I? Yes. Do I? Yes, I do. Yes. You know, it's interesting though, and I think you can bring any kind of dominant dynamic, identity dynamic, depending on the industries you're in, depending on the groups you're in. You know, we all jockey for position, as we were talking about before. The way that our society is set up is that we like to put people in a hierarchy. Hello, patriarchy. That's what happens. Right. There's a linear path. And so often, it's like, why can't I just do this, without understanding the fact that, like, how many times has your value been questioned in your life?
Right.
Not necessarily just about your ability to show up and just like nail it at a wedding, but like, how much has your value been questioned from start to finish at every turn you have?
Yes.
Do you belong here at the bare minimum? That, like, the whole idea of like welcoming me into the party, that is questioning my value. So the ability to say, this is how much it's worth, and you're going to pay me that, isn't, why can't I just flip a switch and be good at it? It's literally like, again, I've had to constantly prove my worth before you even knew who I was, from such a young age, that, like, of course it's going to be extra difficult, because not only, and it's funny, I was having this conversation. I have a member of my team who's a delight. She actually was my first ever person that I hired back in like 2008 or something. I don't remember.
Gosh, wow.
But she came back and she's now working with me, and she's been bringing a lot of stuff in, a lot of ideas for like marketing and strategy. And one of the conversations we had to have, she's a white woman, and one of the conversations we had to have was, hey, these are really great tactics and metrics that people use, but most of these things are white men talking about it. White men telling you how to set up your business, white men telling you how to market, white men telling you how to get big ticket clients. Yes. And I said, we could do all those things, and I promise you we won't be as successful, because the filter with which the world is going to see all those things is through my face, is through my existence. I am not going to be a white man. No matter how much white man energy I put into this, it's not going to bring me what the world is set up to just flow in. And so I always like that particular, again, that realization, but also like, again, it's not stuff that's said out loud in a way that's not like, fuck white men. I don't actually believe that. I don't actually believe that we need to say down with white men. I think it's, how can we look at the system that says that they can do this, and I have to do 5 times more to even be seen, not get the worth and the value of it, but to be seen and not be seen as a problem in the space. And so how do we
look at the system and say, why are people being undervalued based on their identity? Not why is that person not asking for more money?
Because I used to have a joke with my husband.
Yeah.
I'd be like, why don't we send you into all the meetings? And,
exactly.
I would do that. And, because, or I'd be like, you should be on the call for the sales call because they need to see you and I'll just be on the side. Let's make them think you're in charge. I mean, I would sometimes think like we would just joke, like, let's do that to see if we would get more business. Like, it's amazing.
It is. It is. And it's true, right? Like the thing about it is like, as positive and uplifting as I like to be, and as forward thinking and progressive moving as I think we should be in the way that we create the future we have, it is important for us to understand and acknowledge the reality we're living in. So we don't think it's us. We don't think it's us as an individual that is flawed and that like you need to be better at your worth. It's understanding that there are dynamics outside of it. And how do we hold that space and honor that space? Is it that we're like, hey, so if you need my husband on this call and I'm not valuable enough, I'm not sure that we're the right fit. And do we leave that on the table, right? Exactly. Do we leave that money on the table for whoever else is more appropriate for them? Or is it that they came to me because they thought, oh, well, I'm going to value her lower, so she'll give me a deal. That's not how this is going to play out. And so it's its own circuitous mindfuck, because you've been told this whole time that you should devalue yourself. You stepped out of a situation where you're like, wait, I'm not being valued. I'm being told the only way I can be valuable is to put on another person's persona.
Right. Yes.
So I want to be me. And in order to be me, you're telling me I have to give you a discount. So are you my client? Like, are you what I need? Or should I again say, thank you,
this isn't for me, right? Yep.
Yeah. But that's another thing that's like, what's on the other side of it? Because again, for those of us that haven't had a place to land where we exist and look and belong like other people,
right? We
don't have that. Like, I feel like when I talk to people that they're like, the only place that I was around people that look like me was at home. And I'm like, well, not at my house. At my house, I didn't look like people. In my family, I didn't look like people, because on one side of my family, it was one thing. And on the other side of my family, it was the other thing. And, as much as it wasn't awful. It wasn't oppressive, outwardly oppressive in any kind of way. It was just like, as a human being, you see and know the differences of how you're treated out in the world that either you feel and your family doesn't feel, or you feel within your family one way or another. And so how can you honor and hold that space, but also understand that as an adult, if I say no to a client, when I didn't necessarily have that landing spot as a kid, how am I supposed to feel like I'm definitely going to have that landing spot as an adult in my business when I'm like, you know what?
Because you didn't practice it. You didn't, and that's what's so amazing to me about, just growing up in a society or within a certain culture where that stuff is not even a question. Like, I have friends who don't even think about that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like my one friend who's visiting in town, I'm terrible, right? But this is my brain, right? So, and I'm probably based on how, my experiences through life, she was going to meet my in-laws, and I knew my mother-in-law specifically is very judgmental. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want, my friend to feel her energy or feel like she was being a certain way, and feel like she didn't belong, because I know that feeling, right?
Yeah, so no one wants that feeling.
And in any situation, I'm very, sensitive to that for other people even. So I said to her, maybe, she was going to show up to meet my mother-in-law in some sweatpants, and I said, since we're going to go out to lunch, maybe, throw on, like, as a friend, I was like, maybe you should throw on a dress, because we're going to go to lunch. And after a couple of days, my friend was really upset with me. She's like, I can't believe you just didn't, and she's my white friend. She's like, I just couldn't, you just didn't, like, why can't I just be myself and wear what I want to wear to meet your mother? And it dawned on me, and I was like, it would have never, in my life, I would have never thought to wear sweatpants to lunch, because I can't. Mm. I am not judged the same. I have to show up looking the best, looking good, looking to the nines to get any sort of like respect and any sort of response from someone, how dare if I showed up in sweatpants, like, it doesn't, mm-hmm. luxury, right? That's like a luxury to be able
It's
to
not an
show
option.
up.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it was so interesting. Yeah, sorry about that. That to be able to like explain that to my friend, and I apologized to her. I said, I'm so sorry because you've never had to do that. So it didn't even, you know, she didn't even think twice about showing up looking. She thought, well, people should just like me for who I am and not what I look like. And that is so, to me, I've never, I'm like, you can do that?
That's an option. Where's that? I see 4 options. There's been a 5th this whole time. No way. Yeah. It's fascinating. You know, it's interesting because again, this is the part of like, so much of when I talk about generational changes and generational leadership changes and leadership in business, but leadership into the way that we lead our lives moving forward, is that there's this old guard that we have learned, like our generation, bridge generation, like we have the understanding of old school and we have to have understanding of some version of new school. So how do we create what will be the old guard in a way that allows for the new guard to exist while still understanding the worlds and the rules that we had to operate by, that we're just kind of like, I can't put sweatpants on. Like, how do we own and on in that space? But also the fact that you have the ability to have that conversation with someone that's like, hey, I really didn't like that you told me I couldn't wear sweatpants. And you're like, I didn't even realize that this is going to be such an in-depth conversation about identity options and permission.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and because like growing up, all we heard is like, because, you know, you're a minority in this school, you have to be better, you have to work harder, you can't work the same as your white friends, you have to do things on a different level to you know, and that's what all I heard. Yeah.
So that's what you knew. I mean, it's like so much, again, I like want to get up on soapboxes all day. This is why when we're talking about like dismantling all these things that are just so much like the way we operate, when we talk about having a culture that's white supremacist, and it's not, and again, for people that are white, when you say white supremacist, they see KKK. They don't understand that. And I shouldn't even just say white people. A lot of people, when you say that, that's what they see: white hoods, torches, or, you know, tiki torches in Charlottesville, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, right.
But what it is the fact that our system is set up on whiteness, right? So you have the people that show up in those outfits, and also you have the fact that we operate in a way that we are like, yeah, we need to prioritize the comfort and the stability and the prosperity of what has been seen as the white normal. And so how do we create a space that it's like, oh, yeah, that thing that I said about sweatpants, like I said that because I actually have had to survive in this situation.
Yes, right.
And again, it's such a nuanced conversation of why, right? And the ability, again, the ability to have somebody that comes back to you and says, I really didn't appreciate that. And to have a space to be like, oh, you didn't appreciate that for these factors. I don't appreciate it either, but like, appreciation about something like that doesn't even enter my consciousness. And so how can we have a conversation where I break down the fact that like, actually, I should be upset that happens, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me that I kept doing it. Like I actually was having a conversation with someone the other day that was like, you know, I feel really bad thinking back to all the times I let somebody mistreat me or let somebody, you know, make comments that were really oppressive or harmful. It's like a lot of times what we're doing is we're just doing what we need to do to make it through. We understand whether we know overtly and consciously what the power dynamics are or not, what we need to keep moving forward. And so often those are the barriers with which we're like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize that I've been hurtling. Right? I didn't realize that there were all these jumps that I had
you don't do this too? You don't do this? I thought, oh man, I thought this is how it is. Like I thought this
and the thing about it is, right, as individuals, you're no better or worse than me, and I'm no better or worse than you. But our experiences have been different. And it is important for us to say that out loud, what those experiences are. So we have the ability, as you're talking about, well, like, I really want to make sure that people feel like they belong. You were making that comment to make sure that she didn't feel like shit. Right.
Right.
But without her having an understanding of your experience and you having an understanding of her experience, the wires would never, they'd be crossed. And so, like you were talking about, relationships, marriages, relationships, family relationships, friend relationships, in this world that we have, where we've all been kind of operating on what we think is the same vocabulary, but with so many different meanings, we need to have the ability to actually be in the sticky conversation with the people we care about, so we can learn both with them, but then also in a larger world, how to show up in a way that we're not creating harm or perpetuating stuff that we don't even believe in, that's actually probably harming us at the same time. Yeah. It's
my God. You couldn't have said that any better. That was spot on. Like,
oh, well, thank you. Curtsy. You can't really.
Yeah, no, really.
I'm sitting down. So I just feel like we could talk forever. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about the Meghan Markle Prince Harry thing.
Oh, okay. We can touch on it quickly.
No. Well, okay. I feel like I just remember you had a commentary about how the world, and this a very similar experience. And again, I feel like it was one of those things that I was like, this would have been something I would have talked to Dave about.
Right.
So for you to be, when you came on and you're like, oh, you guys are acting like this is crazy, but this happens. This happens when you're in a situation where people are asking, like, is your baby going to come out darker? Is your, all that stuff.
I didn't understand why people were so shocked. I mean, like, my own father-in-law was like, I thought my baby would be darker. Like, he said that to me. Like, I am not, like, these are things that we hear. Like, I don't know what the big deal was. Yeah. But a lot of my friends, I have biracial friends who are, I would say they're more, they support more of the other side of it, where they felt like still regardless of the fact that we're used to it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
And that's not what I was saying. I don't say that, but I also was just like, welcome to our world, Meghan. Like, but I'm sure she was already there. Like,
right. It was more the collective response that was like, welcome. The party's been going on for a while. We're understanding the hurdles. I'm glad that you now see them. Now let's move forward. It doesn't mean that now these hurdles are here. It's okay that they're here. It's that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm sure she has felt that, but so, I do believe that, like, the whole thing with the interview was a little bit of an over dramatization, I think she maybe, come on, she could, there's no way growing up in America that she did not face some of the same challenges we did, you know what I mean? As biracial women, like, there's no way. So yeah, I think she just wanted the world to hear it, I guess. Which is cool.
And the world needed to hear. I mean, I remember being in high school and my high school boyfriend's mom telling me that if we first of all, every time she walked anywhere, she would yell no babies because, she thought because I was not white that I was trying to get knocked up by her husband. I mean, her husband.
That's pretty, whoa, that's in your face.
It was its own thing. I was like 14 years old and never kissed a boy before, really. But let's talk about my babies. But that would also go alongside where she had this, like, she would try to convince me that I was going to have children that were like so dark skinned with her very, 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 very white son. And this conversation came up over and over and over again. And like, there are only so many ways that you can try to end it as a 14, 15-year-old girl being like, okay, like, no, that's not okay. All right, cool. Like, but the conversation is happening and will continue to happen until there's a light that's shown on it on a level that's like, this is outrageous. Yes. Okay. Broad swath of America is now seeing this. And this is a problem, but also for so many of us that have had to have these conversations in the dark or behind the scenes or in our close-knit families, the ability to see it happening outside and see the validation of this is kind of ridiculous. We already knew it was ridiculous, but the response there, and now having that point where, like, if this happens again, somebody at least has the ability to pull back to Meghan Markle's experience and say, remember how people responded to this? You're doing this.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. The ability to, again, the nuance of it all is so important. And the fact that I think part of what our existence is, right? Our existence in creating spaces where you can show up as you, I can show up as me, and people can show up as themselves, is we're just creating room for that nuance to exist, for us to be able to be better versions of ourselves in the way that we just align more closely with who we are.
Right. Well, and I think you know, and it's in within my business, it's understandable. Like I said, I'm really not trying to make generalizations, but this is just my experience. Okay. Like, please, no one hate me for saying this, but when I have worked with my, you know, Black planners, or, you know, I've noticed that it's a little more challenging, because I feel like and again, and I can totally relate to it, but it's not like, you know, with a lot of my white planners, it's easy. They're like, oh, Andrea, we trust you. You know, you got it. You got this, whatever. Mm-hmm. I notice with, you know, a lot of my Black female planners, it's like micromanaging and not trusting, wanting to control every portion of it. And it becomes the experience is like a complete disaster and train wreck because of the micromanaging aspect, you know? Mm. And so, and I know why though, because it's like, you want to keep being invited to the party, and it's like, you know, it's so intense, and I get it, but I just wish there was more of this like supportive energy, like, don't worry, like, I got you, like, I'm not gonna let you down.
Well, and I'm gonna pull back to, like, I feel like it's the same energy of don't wear your sweatpants. Like, you don't have the opportunity, if the world that we have doesn't afford for Black women to make mistakes, doesn't and will scapegoat Black women as the person that's responsible for mistakes, but never glorify them when things go well.
Yep.
It's a part of us being, what we were just talking about, the fact that like valuing ourselves is really difficult. When you haven't had the opportunity, you are going to be in a spot where you're like, I've learned from before where I have to protect things. I've learned from before where I have to be on top of things. I've learned so much from before, that the ability for us so often to pull up and redefine is hard.
But it handicaps us. It handicaps
us. True.
And that's what it's like, it's that I've really tried to, you know, figure out a way, what could we do to just change that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, the beauty of it all, I think, is, well, I shouldn't say this. A broad sweeping comment is the ability for us to witness our ability to do things well. And again, we're all in a very new space, especially right now. We're going to be in a very new space of what the after times, whenever the after times come about, how we can redefine what those things look like and be able to see those proof points that can help us release the clench that we have, the white knuckle grip that we have, the really, really tightness that we're feeling about, especially from a micromanaging perspective. How can we allow ourselves to see that things are happening that are okay, that I can release some control, that I can trust the people around me, that I can trust what I do? Because I actually know internally, right? I've got that confidence somewhere internally, but the world has told me I have to constantly vet and look through everything I'm doing, because they're constantly looking for my flaws. Whereas in the same realm, other folks might not have their work critiqued quite so minutely.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I'm hopeful. I'll tell you, I'm hopeful for that. And I think the ability for us to be in more spaces where we actually get to have, this is part of the piece we were talking about before, of like actually getting to have conversations where you get to the root of the matter.
Well, you see me, I'm sitting here like, I mean, like, I'm not even confident, like, saying this out loud. I apologize. I'm like, I'm sorry that I have to say this. Like, I don't want to have to do that anymore. I want to just be like, listen, this is what's happening. This is my experience. Like, let's fix it. Like, why I feel like I am not the type of person. I don't like to tiptoe around feelings. Like, I'm really just a direct person. So I want to make it better I want to do my part, whatever I can do. But I feel like we spend so much time, you know, making sure we don't offend and making sure, you know, and that gets us caught up, you know?
Yeah. We live in sound bites. I mean, that's also part of it too, that like, if you only cut 15 seconds of this, I'm going to be misrepresented. Do we have enough time and space to actually, like you were saying, to have substantive, real relationships takes time, takes energy, and takes the willingness to show up and maybe be more vulnerable than you're used to, and to trust the other person to be there. Yeah. Well, I will say this, I am so grateful that you were willing to come here and have this conversation with me, that you were willing to kind of get into the nuance, get into the gray area with me, because it's probably my favorite place to be. And I think both of us, you know, whether it's our favorite place or not, we've been in the gray area, in the in-between for a lot of our lives. So I am just so grateful that you were willing to come here and talk about all this stuff. Of course, I want to talk to you forever.
I know.
And thank you. I'm just going to say this. Thank you for picking this week. Thank you for picking today for us to connect. I feel Dave here. I feel David here. I know you call him David. I call him Dave. And I'm just so grateful that I will say I'm so grateful that I got to meet you back in like 2006, 2007 when I came and saw your play, but like just so grateful that our energies, our human being existence got to be in the same place at the same time on this earth, because
me too.
That, like I started with, that light is bouncing off each other pretty hard right now. And so I'm so freaking grateful.
Well, because I think we have to, you know that we, like, you know, when you just know, you get, you know, when you know.
Yes.
It's like I just believe this about myself and people that I come into contact with, people in my life that come in my life, they're special, you know?
Yes.
And we have a, you know, a part to play on this earth, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, really when we unite with people with like minds and who are, you know, there's a reason that we're all kind of like, you know, tethered together. So I think that's how we really begin to make change, is we all, you know, really lean and depend and rely and be there for each other. So I'm so grateful for you. Like I started this off, you know, people would say brown nosing you, but I'm for real. Like I meant every word of it. So
hey, the brown nose was mutual, so it's fine. It's fine. I'm here for it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope for those of you that are listening, you find those people that feel like magical connections for you, because it is something that fills our cups when our cups feel empty. And it is so important. So, Andrea, thank you for coming.
Love you. Thank you.
Love you right back.
Bye. Bye.
Can you tell that we could have talked for way longer? Andrea is a true joy, and I'm so grateful that she joined for this episode, and even more excited that we got to take some extra time to celebrate Dave, her brother, his life that meant so much to so many of us. So for those of you who got to meet Dave through this conversation today, you're welcome. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And also, I want to take a minute at the end to just hold some space and acknowledge something. So often on this podcast in particular, my goal is to speak the unspoken, to hold space for the conversations that have been silenced or just avoided altogether. And what you experience in this conversation with Andrea is that we got the chance to really talk about the in-between, to get to talk about the gray area, to get to acknowledge and honor our lived experiences as unique individual experiences, and then also as this collective human race that we've got here. Now, if you found yourself feeling something, feeling surprised, feeling validated, feeling something resonated, or hating what we talked about, or feeling super confused, I want to hear about it. So if you go to nikkyinnocent.com/join the conversation, I would love to hear your response, what resonated, all those things I just mentioned about this episode. I know Andrea would love to hear from you too. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And for those of you who are going through it right now, I am sending you a massive virtual hug. You are not alone, and you are a light in this world. I will catch you on the next episode.